Let's change focus now into the state capture inquiry has wrapped up for the week with the testimony from Director-General at National Treasury, Dondo Mogajane. For more details on this, we cross live now to eNCA's Erin Bates, who is in Parktown. And Erin, I was saying a bit earlier on that if the evidence of Dondo Mogajane stands unchallenged, then it would suggest that it is true what they say. Truth is really stranger than fiction. That first meeting with Des van Rooyen, having come in after Nhlanhla was sacked, was the stuff of legends, wasn't it?
I mean, that's one way of putting it, Tulas. It really was, on Mogajane's account, the most surreal experience. And his testimony today really buttresses what we heard from Lungisa Fuzile yesterday. And we're starting to get a really clear sense from the inner workings of government's engine room on finance. What was happening during crunch time at the end of December 2015 when the rand was taking a real pummeling. And it seems as though governance in one of the most critical ministries in our government was an absolute shambles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it suggests that we were almost headed for a crash, yet the cockpit was all confused and jumbled up. He says he personally felt hurt, this is Dondo Mogajane, because of, quote unquote, what we were doing to ourselves. What did he mean? What did he mean by that?
Yes, there he really described the events that passed through that week of the 9th of December 2015, or the 7th, I should say. The Monday was the 7th, the Wednesday was the 9th, when Nhlanhla was fired at around 8 o'clock in the evening by then President Jacob Zuma and replaced with fairly unknown Des van Rooyen. And what Mogajane really described as his sadness at what was happening, to a point where he really disassociated from events in National Treasury where he'd been serving sort of on and off from 1999 because things were so absolutely terrible, really. By the time Des van Rooyen called a meeting on the 11th at National Treasury with whoever was still around, because of course by December a lot of people had gone onto holiday for the festive season. And there Mogajane describes Van Rooyen arriving with these two advisors, and that coincides with the evidence we heard from Fuzile of Enoch Godongwane of the ANC, calling him with what Advocate Maleka called this nightmarish prediction that Van Rooyen would arrive with two ministers' advisors of Indian descent, and that indeed played out. And so Van Rooyen pitches up at National Treasury with these two men who, we understand from Fuzile and Mogajane's testimony, he didn't really seem to know that well, to a point where Mogajane, and I have to put my notebook down to do this justice, Mogajane says that Van Rooyen gestured at one of them and said, "This is and at that point Mohammed Borbad said Mohammed, and Van Rooyen tried to make light of that and say, yes, haha, we call him Mo. He's my chief of staff, according to Mogajane, Van Rooyen said, at which point Borbad waved his hand or his finger and said, no, 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 I'm your advisor. So this is someone coming into National Treasury at a crunch time when the rand was tanking, who didn't seem to know who his ministers and ministers' advisors were, or really what was going on. And perhaps most worryingly, and I think I'll end off this monologue there, but there's just so much to go through, Tulas, Mogajane said that Van Rooyen didn't speak to the critical issues at that time, which was how they were going to deal with this crisis in National Treasury following Van Rooyen's arrival.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's quite strange, that whole scene. I mean, the way he dramatized it, I guess it takes us into the building inside National Treasury in Pretoria at that particular point. So he has wrapped up for now, Erin, and there are suggestions, there's indications that he's got a lot more that he wants to tell the Commission in the coming weeks and months. Where do we go on Monday? The witnesses have been revealed for Monday, and I can tell you, I'm not sure if you are aware, we've also discovered now from Gwedemantashe that he is the witness that has been subpoenaed for Tuesday. But what happens before we get to Tuesday?
Yes, so just on that, Tulas, firstly, critically, Mogajane says, and this is as a current serving Director-General in National Treasury, they've made a commitment as of yesterday to provide the inquiry with modelling, economic modelling, on how much the Guptas were making through their various companies in terms of government business in late 2015. And this is in order to empower the inquiry to test the testimony of Mcebisi Jonas that a Gupta brother told him the family was making around 6 billion rand from the state and wanted to push that up to 8 billion, and they wanted to, on Jonas's testimony, embroil him or rope him, recruit him into doing so. So that's the one commitment Mogajane has made. They're going to do that investigation and provide that information to the inquiry as quickly as possible. On Monday we have two witnesses, another National Treasury representative who's the Chief of Communication. Her name escapes me offhand at this point, but I will make sure that I issue it on...
Yes.
Thank you. You're more on top of on the names than I am at this point. Then we also have Mzwanele Manyi, who was scheduled to speak today but had to be postponed because Fuzile took longer than anticipated. And then, as you've pointed out, critically, we're going to hear from Gwede Mantashe, the current Mineral Resources Minister, then ANC Secretary General on Tuesday. And he's specifically going to deal with the issue of meetings that were called for with the banks. Only one of the four major banks in South Africa agreed to that meeting at Luthuli House. He's set to talk on that, amongst other issues. Yeah,
and that had to do with the closure of the accounts of Gupta-related entities. I mean, the testimonies that have been coming out. I mean, the name Gwede Mantashe has come out quite a number of times at the testimonies, for instance, of Feki Mento, hasn't it, Erin?
Yes, indeed, and from some of those banking officials who discussed the kind of communications they had with ANC officials following the group decision, it seems, or the kind of consecutive decisions to close Gupta-linked bank accounts. And critically there, we also had testimony this week from Praveen Gordhan on exactly that, and the creation of an ad hoc committee in government led by the then Minister of Mineral Resources, who was thought to be a Gupta ally, Mosebenzi Zwane, to deal with this question of whether or not Cabinet could lawfully intervene, although maybe that wasn't really their concern as much as it was Gordhan's, intervene in the closure of accounts between private banks and Gupta-linked companies.
All right, so this week's episodes are done. Erin, take a break because you will need it. Next week there'll be more to come from the series that we are watching that is so critically serious, though, at the same time. That is the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. eNCA's Erin Bates out in Parktown watching the State Capture Commission of Inquiry there for us.